Thank you, Marcus, for the introduction. So let's start first by addressing the question, why do I need to care about data management plans, or why do I need to write them? For one is you have to. So now it's required by most funding agencies that you need to submit a data management plan as part of your proposal to get money. And I have a screenshot here from the DFG where this was announced in March 2020, that now you need to include comprehensive information of how you handle research data. For another reason, data management plans make your research better. So if you plan the process beforehand, it means you would maintain the high quality standards, you would maintain the research integrity, and you would also plan of maintaining the scientific value of your research data. So it's a way to improve your research data. So we'll move next. When we talk about research data management plans, let's try to dissect the term by term by term. So first, let's start by research data. What are research data? So basically, they are the facts, the numbers that you collect in your lab, and then you analyze in order to validate, discuss, or conclude information from your research. And basically, if you think about it, this is the key outcome of a research process. It's not your paper, it's not your patent, it's not your dissertation. What you are really getting out of the lab is research data. So this is the key outcome. And it can take several forms. As you can see, it can be a measured data, what you get from equipment. You could record it as a picture with your phone or take a video of a process that as it's happening. It can be a computation, simulation, a test protocol, or even an object or a sample that you have prepared. And if we would think of the life cycle of, or the lifetime of research data, if we think of the traditional way, it's not really a cycle, it's a lifetime. So you plan your experiment, you start data acquisition, and then you analyze data, and finally, you put it in a publication or a dissertation. And if you think about this, many or large volumes of data that were not part of a nice story to be published or to be included in a fancy publication would stay in your drawer and nobody would ever hear about it. So that's why now many people advocate the new life cycle of research data, which is a true cycle. So you start by planning your data collection, then you collect the data, you analyze it, and you preserve the data. So you have to ensure that data is saved in a place that would keep it for a long period of time, and it will be accessible for other periods, for other people, sorry. And then comes the sharing phase where people can see this data, access it, and the final phase is to reuse this data so that we can enter again into the cycle and repeat. And as you see from the cycle, it has several processes. And if we have several processes, then we need a management process to manage all that. And this is what the term research data management is. So it is a process where you, it's a process of handling research data and applying skills and practices in order to ensure that the data you collect can be found by yourself, by other people in your lab or even outside. It's accessible, it's reusable, and understandable. And doing research data management also ensures that the data collected and the whole process is fair, which is the acronym described earlier today by Christoph. And as it's a management process, when you manage something, whether it's building Burj Khalifa or just managing your grocery shopping in the weekend, it has several stages. So you start with planning, and then you execute, you monitor and control, and then you close your project. And in the same way, the research data management occur. And the planning process basically gets the form of writing a data management plan. So a data management plan is a document that contains the strategy, procedure, and tools that will be used to handle your research data in the project. And basically, it covers all the processes and the stages of research data management. So it's not just about the planning, but also it covers how things will be executed, how things will be monitored, and how the project will be closed in terms of storing data and making it available afterwards. And the elements of a data management plan, and this basically are the checklist as provided by the DFG requirements. And it includes, you have to write about the data. You have to comprehensively describe your data. There's a section about documentation and data quality, storage, both during the period of the project and afterward, as well as any legal obligations and conditions and responsibility and resources. I'll take you through in the next slides on these various elements. And first of all, if you want to write a data management plan, you need to know what you are managing. And here you have to comprehensively describe the data in your project, such as, is it a measured data? Is it a computed data, a simulation, an object, and so on. Another category to clarify here is whether this data is generated by your project, or is it data that's being reused from a repository or from another source. And the second level of description is to describe the source of your data. For example, if it's a measurement data, then describe the instrument, the vendor, the model, the specifications of the detector, the analyzer, and the measurement conditions. And if it's a software, if it's a computation, then describe the software and the computer code used to that will be used to prepare this data. And afterwards, describe the format of the file that will be used to store this data. And here, you have to describe if it's a proprietary file format that basically saved by most of the instruments. And then in this case, you describe how can it be accessible and how can it be read. And if you plan to convert the file format from proprietary file format to a general format that's open source, for example, you have to describe the process of conversion and also think about whether you're going to lose any metadata in the process and how are you going to overcome that or restore this data. And finally, you have to describe the quantity of data that you expect to generate in the project. And this is basically in terms of volume, gigabytes, or so on. And the next element is documentation and data quality. And here, basically, you describe all the aspects, including how we're going to associate your data to metadata, describe everything, store them in files and file naming, and so on. And I will discuss briefly a few of these aspects. And the first aspect is to organize your data. So now you have to structure your data in a way that's easily, when you look for something, it's easily findable. Some ways of doing this basically could be by the user or by the experiment category in a file format, like the folder structuring, and also in selecting the naming convention for your data file. So it has both understandable for you and also think about being understandable by a program or a machine or a software that can manage your data as well, data files. The next aspect is to associate your data to enrich metadata. And this is basically one of the most important aspects of the documentation part here. And you have to describe what metadata standards you plan to use and how, if there's any specific fields, any specific field conventions that you plan to use, document all this and write it in your DMP in this section. The next level is to ensure the data quality and how you're gonna manage that in your project. For example, if you are measuring a sample in X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy, manage the frequency of calibrating your instrument with a gold sample, for example, and then the analysis that you're going to do to find the Fermi edge. The same, for example, for Raman spectroscopy, the frequency of using a silicon sample to find the right calibration for the detector. This has all to be described in DMP. And finally, describe the tools that will be used to maintain all this documentation in terms of which ELN are you going to be using, electronic lab notebook, which lab management system are you using. All these should be included in this section. The next element is to describe the storage and the technical archiving of your data. And this basically refers to the storage during the project. So as we are running the project, where are you going to keep your data? Describe this. It's going to be on a hard drive or a central hard drive or on the cloud. And describe the backup procedure that you're going to do. And are you going to back up the data on the same medium or different medium and then store them in the physical spaces? So all this should be thought of and documented properly in this section in the data management plan. You have to consider any legal obligations and conditions that are associated with your project and the data collection and describe them clearly in your DMP. And some examples include discussing data ownership, intellectual properties, copyrights, or data licenses. And then in this section, basically, it's the long-term accessibility, and it concerns the storage of data after the project ends. And basically, this has two parts. One is the data preservation aspect and the data dissemination. So in data preservation, you have to define the time frame of how long your data will be saved in a data repository and stays there. And basically, you have to check the requirements of the funder for that. But as a good practice, a good scientific practice, 10 years period is a sound period for a minimum data preservation. You have to specify the data repository where you will store your data. Select the data repository that matches your field, and for a comprehensive list, you can check this re3data.org, which is a database, a collection of all repositories, field specific, and then you decide where you put your data, mention this in the DMP, and explain if there's any preparation steps for your data files before uploading them to the repository. As for the data dissemination, you have to explain whether your data will be publicly available or whether some items cannot be shared openly. And in that case, you have to justify a reason. Why cannot I share this data? Is it an industrial project that I'm not allowed to share these, or any other reason? And also, you can also explain embargo periods on this data and justify them in this section as well. And in the final section, if you have a management plan, then you need people to carry this management process. And here, basically, you define the responsibilities and resources early on in your data management plan. And basically, a simple way of doing this is to outline the various tasks that you have already written down in the DMP and list the skills necessary. Then you start deciding, do I have the people to do this task in my group, or do I need to train them, or do I need to hire new people? And basically, anything that you need to plan that requires costs can be described in your DMP as a request for funding from your funding agency, that I need this money to do this training or this data management process, and also specifically for data storage. If you need to pay for facilities to store your data, I think it's possible now to make these requests to your funding agency to supply you with the amount of money to do this storage. At the end, writing a data management plan is required, but it's a way also to improve your research process. And keep in mind that there is no one-size-fits-all template for DMPs, and you always have to see what fits your project. Check the funder requirements of data management plan. In Germany, you are lucky that there's several NFDI consortia in different fields, so you can talk to them and see what are the specific requirements for your fields. And also you could consult with university libraries and zentrums in your university. And all the information I discussed today are available in our guide for data management plans. You can download it online using the QR code. And also we have hard copies available here to take with you. And finally, we have also on the same topic, we have a poster number 18 that will be presented by Dr. Lucia Rotheray. Feel free to pass by, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.